Afternoon, Cherries fans, and welcome to this latest show here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Now, before I do welcome on my special guest to speak about a very important topic, here's a little bit about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. Find out what they can do for you. Visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk. Now, of course, last night there was breaking news that the club was subject to a bid for an American consortium. It's since come out this morning that that American consortium is actually being headed by Bill Foley of Vegas Golden Knights in the NHL. What we'd like to do in this show is find out a little bit more about Bill, also about the legacy that Maxim Demin has left at the club. Will he get his investment back from being owner of AFC Bournemouth, and lots more. It is a pleasure, therefore, to welcome on Kieran Maguire. Afternoon, Kieran. How are you?
I'm very good. I've just had a session with a personal trainer. So, like all old men, I'm creaking a bit, but football finance is keeping me fully occupied as always.
Excellent stuff. So, as we found out last night, we didn't know the name of the person at that point who was being linked with AFC Bournemouth, but we do now, thanks to Sky Sports and other news outlets out there. And that gentleman is Bill Foley. William P Foley II is the longer title that he goes by. But let's start off with Maxim Demin, who has, I'm sure you agree, done a fantastic job at Bournemouth in managing the club financially shrewdly, but also putting us on and getting us to this point. What do you make of the work that he's done?
I think in terms of providing an infrastructure, financial infrastructure, providing the funding which allowed Bournemouth to compete, first of all, in the Championship, which is very challenging, and then not only to get to the Premier League, but to survive there for a few years, is a sign of sensible investment. It hasn't been cheap for Maxim Demin. Whilst the riches of the Premier League are there, that money quickly disappears in the form of wages. You've only got to look at Bournemouth's wage bill quickly went to more than £100 million a year from around about 10th of that in League One. So he has backed a series of managers. Bournemouth have spent, by their standards, huge amounts of money. I'd say it's relatively modest by Premier League standards, but they've not overstretched themselves. So I'm sure the Demin era will be viewed with affection by fans.
Yep, most definitely. And the good thing with Maxim Demin is he's allowed Neil Blake, Richard Hughes, Jeff Mostyn to manage the club in their own way. He's been a bit more of a silent partner, although he's owned the majority. He has been that silent partner that's provided the money, but at a sensible rate. Of course, competing in the Premier League nowadays, it's becoming a billionaire's playground. And although Maxim Denim does fall into that, um, he has invested over the last 2 seasons. I think it was 30 million last season, if I'm correct, and 30 million as well this season. So I guess there's always that point where people will look, and these owners will look to move on, won't they?
Yes, if you're writing out a check every single week, which often can be hundreds of thousands of pounds, you've then got to look to say, what type of return am I getting on this investment? And in football, it is a different industry to traditional ones. There is a financial return which has not been significant in the sense that that Maxim Denim has never taken money out of the club. He's always been prepared to put money in. The only way you get money from a football club is effectively at the purchase date and the sale date. And I know some other owners have said those are the two happiest days of your ownership, because what's in between is that constant demand on you for cash. But I think you're right that the Premier League is no longer 4 or 5 extremely wealthy owners. We've now reached significantly more than that. Chelsea have been taken over. It became one billionaire's plaything transferred to another. We've seen what's happened at Newcastle. That's increased competitiveness. Recent ownership changes, or relatively recent ownership changes at clubs such as Villa, the potential investment by San Francisco 49ers into Leeds and so on, makes it a really tough division to compete in financially. And perhaps you just reach that stage to say, there's more to life than what I'm doing at present, and you move on to other things.
Well, let's look at Bill Foley. So he is the owner of Vegas Gold Knights, which is an NHL team in the US. Of course, he's been a very, very successful businessman. I understand he's valued around about the 1.2 billion mark. Do you know much about the Vegas Golden Knights and what he's done there?
No, I think it's what you might call a classic entry into American franchise sports. What we tend to see is individuals being successful in their own chosen field, and then they wonder what they should do with that money, and they want something which is perhaps a bit more exciting than investing in other traditional industries. And sports franchise brings you that, because it gives you a degree of attention that you would not get in any other area of society. There are many billionaires in the United States of America, but there's a relatively small cohort of those who own NBA, NHL, NFL clubs, and the attention that brings. So that's what he's done in terms of his NHL franchise. The Premier League is acknowledged as being the European Super League. We're seeing these comments increasingly frequently, and also from the point of view of American investors. And I think this is a thing which we perhaps understate here. The interest in the Premier League and football in general following Ted Lasso is ridiculous. I teach in the States, and when I go across there to teach traditional football finance, the first thing they said to me, can you do a Ted Lasso tour if we fly across to the UK? And I'm going, well, we probably can, but I don't think anybody's ever thought about doing it as far as we're concerned. You've then got the fact that the dollar is very strong against the pound, which means that buying a UK football club is that much cheaper. And it's broadcast in 198 countries around the world. Under those circumstances, it becomes a very attractive and a very seductive proposition. Regardless of the level, if anybody's watching the We Are Welcome to Wrexham show. It's compulsive popcorn TV, and again, it makes stepping up a few rungs on the ladder to the Premier League. It makes it that much more exciting and that much more interesting.
So, Bill Foley is a successful entrepreneur. He's the chairman of Fidelity National Financial, Cannae Holdings, and Black Knight Financial Services. Fidelity National Financial are actually worth $8.4 billion. So, one of the biggest insurance companies in the US. One thing that does concern me, though, with a takeover is because we have been run so well. You've had the situation at Liverpool, you've got the situation at Arsenal, you've got the situation at Manchester United with the Glazers, and those people are all got masses of money to actually invest into those football clubs. Of course, we are on a smaller scale. And firstly, the first question is why Bournemouth? But secondly, isn't there a lot of risk around this?
Yeah, I mean, in answer to your first question, why Bournemouth, I think there's two elements to that. First of all, is the club available to buy? And there are presently a handful of Premier League clubs, which people are kicking tires and on some occasions doing a little bit more than that. I can't go into any details. And then secondly, there's the price. Now, my understanding is the price is around about £130 million. That makes Bournemouth pretty much of a bargain, because Southampton went for twice that amount. We saw West Bromwich Albion went for over 200 million. Newcastle was 305, and West Ham owners are my understanding is that they're asking for somewhere between 800 million to £1 billion for a club which hasn't won many trophies for a long time. So if you benchmark against that, Bournemouth does look very competitively priced. He will know that he's buying a club with an 11,000 capacity stadium. But in the Premier League, unless you are in the top six, match day income tends to be 10% or less of your total revenue. So it's not actually a negative discriminator from an investment point of view. So I think those are the reasons people were aware that it was available, and then it comes down to price and product. What are you buying into? Clearly, any new owner will be wanting to avoid relegation, because Premier League broadcast rights are significantly higher than those of the Championship, even if you've got parachute payments for a couple of years. So that, I think, that would have been factored into why the price does look cheaper. There's Bournemouth have got the lowest capacity stadium in the Premier League. The second lowest is probably Palace. My understanding, there's American investment in Palace. They're looking for 220, 230 million for buying a slice of South London, which isn't. I'm a Brighton fan. I'm never going to say anything nice about Crystal Palace. But it's a well-run club, but again, it's got an upside and a downside to it.
So, if this happens, and Sky Sports are currently reporting that it should happen before the World Cup, so of course that is only 2 months away. So, what would be Bill Foley's first task once he steps through those doors?
What he will want to do is an assessment of management, and that's not necessarily management from what's happening on the pitch. It's looking at Neil Blake and his team. Do they agree in terms of structure, culture, objectives, and so on? And the fact that Neil Blake's been familiar with dealing with an overseas owner will stand him in good stead. He's got the experience of the club for a number of years. I would imagine that an evolutionary approach rather than a revolutionary approach would be the one undertaken. And then it's a case of setting budgets. And the fact that we've got an insurance company effectively behind all of this. Fans, they might say they're talking. When I talk to fans, they say, "Oh, yes, we want sustainability. We want somebody who understands the culture and the history and the heritage of the club." What they actually want is somebody with lots of money who's going to spend that money on expensive baubles in the form of players. I don't think that's going to be the case with these owners. American owners, it's not the route that they traditionally go down. I know we've seen some crazy things happening at Chelsea. That's what happens when you've got a new owner who comes in, who appoints himself as interim sporting director and thinks that 4-4-3 is an acceptable formation in football, not realizing that we've not quite got that number of players on the pitch. So I don't see this being the case with Bournemouth, because Todd Boehly has now become a bit of a figure of fun in footballing circles.
And Maxim Demin has started work again on the training ground since promotion to the Premier League. It's not progressing at a very quick rate. I went down there the other day. It looks like there's some diggers. It looks like ground's being moved around. But is it potentially that this takeover talk has held that up? And secondly, could the stadium also be on the agenda once Bill Foley walks through the door?
I think the answer to both of those is yes. It's sort of, to give an analogy, if somebody comes in and offers you a price for your house that's acceptable, the last thing you're going to do is put in a new kitchen, because you don't get the money back. So from Maxim Denim's point of view, why spend money on continued infrastructure projects when that's money coming out of his pocket? Why not effectively put things on hold, let the new owners take over? They might want to make some adjustments to that. As far as Bournemouth are concerned going forwards, the ground is a constraint. And we are seeing more and more clubs get more and more involved with expansion. Crystal Palace, they're looking to expand their main stand. We've seen Leicester City only this week being approved for a 40,000 capacity at their stadium. I know Leeds United are talking about going to 50,000. Liverpool are increasing theirs. Manchester City are looking round and say, well, we need to be competitive. The Glazers are talking about 90,000 at Old Trafford. So if Bournemouth say, no, 11,000 is fine, that's as far as we're ever going to go, I think that would act as a constraint against the club, especially given that it's highly likely the Premier League will adopt a new form of cost control / financial fair play, which is broadly in line with what we're seeing from UEFA. And that would give Bournemouth some challenges if they decide to commit to the existing stadium with the existing capacity.
Of course, Maxim Demin has been around since 2011, and like I say, has done a fantastic job of bringing this club through the leagues. All owners in football or business will want a return of their investment. But football is a little bit different scenario, because there is people, and we've seen it at clubs across the country. Derby's a big one, of course. Mel Morris pumped in a load of money, probably too much money, and then of course he's not seen that return, has he? Let's be fair. But Maxim has done things the right way. Will he see a return of what he's put into this football club?
For an exit price of £130 million, that will reduce the pain. But I don't think it will completely wipe it out. The club has total debts of, if I just check my spreadsheet here, it's got total borrowings of 165 million in its most recent accounts. Now, that's not all to the owner. And those figures are from June 2021. And again, the club's lost money since then, in all probability. So I think it's more of a case of getting an acceptable level of loss. And certainly Maxim Demin will not be the first or the last person to walk away from the Premier League. If you take a look at what happened at Tony G at Villa, and before him, it was I think it was Randy Lerner, and then you've got what happened at Sunderland with their owners. They lost a fortune. it's an intriguing industry, football, because there is no logic a lot of the time in terms of decision making, and you do have to constantly spend money in terms of maintenance of what's happening on the pitch, and sometimes what's happening off the pitch as well. So I think he will have enjoyed the experience. He will have viewed his time with Bournemouth with affection. But it's a bit like an executive toy. You buy them, you have some fun with them, but they can be very costly to run.
Is there risks of this falling through though, as well?
Well, there's always a risk in the sense that we don't know where we're up to in respect of the owners and directors test. All that I would say is, having spoken to some finance journalists from other institutions, they seem fairly relaxed about it. Given the owner's background, there's two core elements to the owners and directors test. The first of which is, are there any outstanding convictions? The second is does the prospective owner have the capacity to run the club for the next two or 3 years? So they have to go and put together a budget and show that they can fund that budget. So I don't see that being an issue. The only other outstanding issues would be, are there any haggles arising as a result of due diligence? Again, it's, to use the analogy of buying a house, you do your homework, you get a surveyor, and the surveyor says, well, there's a bit of dry rot here and there. We need to go and reduce the price. And if anybody's ever been through that experience, you know what it's like. And if both parties ultimately want to do a deal, the deal will be done.
Yeah. Of course, we have got a lot of former players on the books here as well, most notably Steve Fletcher as well. And surely it would be best for the new owners to keep, so Steve Fletcher, Tommy Elphick, amongst many others, surely it would be in the owner's best interest to have that continuity as well, and those people around who know the club inside out.
Yes, whenever there is a takeover, if you try to do too much too quickly with too little knowledge, you can get your fingers burned. Yeah. So I agree with you. Steve Fletcher's been around a long time. Tommy Elphick's from my old part of Brighton, so his family's well known, and he's been fantastic for the club as well. So there is a lot to be said for having that continuity, even if you've got some sort of medium-term plan to bring in your own people. I would first, I'd always use the existing staff as a sounding board, to use their experience, to use their insider knowledge in order to familiarize yourself with the business, because football is like no other business on the planet, and it's not the same as American franchises. We do have relegation. We do have the fact that with an NHL franchise, you can move it from Vegas to Arizona, and that's just agreed, and that's part of the game. Anybody that's had any connection with what's happened at Wimbledon / MK Dons will know, try that in this country, and you will become a very toxic owner very, very quickly.
And the other question that I've got really is, of course, he's got this franchise in the NHL, but how much of his time is he going to be able to dedicate between the two? Because I'm guessing he's not going to give that up, is he?
No, he's certainly not going to give it up. If we take a look at the traditions of American owners, the number of times that Stan Kroenke, John Henry, or the Glazers have been seen at the home grounds of their club, you can put on the fingers of two hands. They tend to have a remote relationship, and they tend to delegate responsibility in terms of strategic and operational decision making. So I don't see any changes as far as the top of the club is concerned. There will be some new directors appointed, because you'll want somebody who's perhaps close to the prospective new owner to have to have their eyes and ears on the ground, and that's fairly common. But I don't see him as being a hands-on owner.
And the other big question as well, and you touched on it there, that there may be new people coming into the club as well. Bill Foley might be the face of it. He does own 100% of the club if it does all go ahead, but I understand that there will be other people in the background also investing alongside Bill.
Yes, and again, that's quite common as far as US ownership is concerned. If we take a look at FSG, there's an investment in FSG from Redbird. If we look at what's happened at Chelsea with regards to the takeover there, all the talk is about Todd Boehly, but actually the club is 60% owned by Clearlake Capital. So consortium-based owners tends to be the way forwards. Again, we've seen the same at Palace when they've got new American investors. That it's not one person, it's 3 or 4, and that can work, and it can sometimes be a negative, because if you want to put in an extra 50 million and you've got 3 people, are they all willing to put in the same amount? If they're not, then there can be conflicts. But that's business, and business always has ways of resolving decisions.
It's quite interesting that if this all goes ahead, which it looks like it is going to at this point, that it will be done by the World Cup. And of course, that will give us a little bit of time before that January window. Could we expect an influx of players during that January window for the owners to actually make themselves known to the rest of the league? Or do you think it will be done sensibly, keep what we've got at the moment? I guess it all depends on position as well.
I think you're absolutely right. If a club is 7 or 8 points adrift at the start of the January window, then attracting players to a club where there is a high probability of relegation is more challenging, because the club, of course, and rightly so, is trying to protect its position by saying, well, we'll offer you 50 grand a week is sort of the going rate now for a bottom 6, bottom 8 club in the Premier League. But we're going to give you a 60% pay cut if you're relegated. Under those circumstances, are you going to accept the deal? So there's always a bit of 3-dimensional chess taking place. Sometimes the owner might say, I'm just going to bite the bullet on this and look at longer term growth and try to regroup. Sometimes the owner might say, well, I'm going to twist on 19 and we're going to go for broke in order to try to avoid relegation and cement a position, because an extra year in the Premier League means that you get 3 years of parachute payments instead of 2. Which is immediately worth at least another 16 to 20 million pounds, and of course you've got another year of Premier League TV revenues. We've just seen the figures for 21-22 in respect of broadcast distributions by the Premier League, and for the first time ever, a club finishing bottom of the Premier League got 100 million pounds in TV money. That's very attractive to a new owner.
Gary O'Neill is in the hot seat at the moment. Of course, Scott Parker was sacked after his comments after that Liverpool game. And that's what makes it also quite interesting, because Scott Parker did knock both the owners and he felt that he wanted more investment into the club, which, I saw that the owners were in the right. I think they were completely right that they actually dismissed Scott Parker. Because of that, he also knocked the team. Gary O'Neill's in the hot seat now. Can you imagine him staying there until at least the World Cup, once this is done? Because there has been names of Dyche bounded around, also overseas managers. I'm guessing it's his job until this is all complete now.
Yes, I think certainly until the deal is signed and sealed. It would make little sense to recruit a new manager who doesn't fit into the culture and strategy of prospective new owners. It could be that it's a joint decision by both old and new, but that gets very messy. So I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this is more of a footballing decision than a finance one in many regards. But from business strategy point of view, you don't make executive changes just before you sell a company because it makes no sense. And and in the case of Scott Parker, as an outsider, you can understand why he said what he said, because he's looking to preserve his job, and you need resources to do that. The history of football tells us that if there's a battle between owner and manager, the owners always win. It was the same with Tuchel at Chelsea when he kept refusing to sign Cristiano Ronaldo purely for footballing reasons, and then the first opportunity to sack him, he's out the door. That always tends to be the case as far as football is concerned.
Do you think Scott was aware of all this going on in the background?
It's not the circles that he moves in. His focus is on training, preparing, managing, coaching players. Football is a very small industry. It's a very incestuous industry. It's a very gossipy industry. I'm sure you know yourself from experience of WhatsApp groups from people at the club, people at other clubs, other journalists. There's stories doing the rounds all of the time, none of which we can go and, of course, put out in the public domain. It's no great surprise. I was aware of issues in relation to Bournemouth and prospective new owners probably 6 to 8 weeks ago, but I've seen those in respect of other clubs as well. So you always take them with a pinch of salt, and you just put it on the back burner. So things clearly have accelerated in the past 24 hours to 48 hours as far as the information which is being put out is concerned.
So once it's all agreed, and the process begins, I guess, at that point of financial fair play, making sure that fit and proper persons test, I should say. So that process begins at that point. From that agreement to everything changing hands, how long will that take?
Well, the Premier League, it's in its own interests for the deal to be dealt with as quickly as possible. And we saw that with Chelsea. We also saw that the Premier League is full of politics, which is why it took 2.5 years to approve the Amanda Staveley / PIF takeover at Newcastle United. I don't see Bournemouth being in that position. So there's absolutely no reason why there are armies of accountants, there are armies of lawyers who are very good at working 24 hours a day and charging you for 48 hours in a day, given the way that they tend to operate, who can get this deal across the line relatively quickly. So there's no reason why we can't have a new owner in place by the time that football resumes following the World Cup. And in theory, there's no reason why we can't have it done before the start of the World Cup.
And the final question really is, we are a newly promoted club. If we are relegated to the Championship with this new owner, is it going to be a case that potentially at that point that they might say, right, okay, we don't want to own a Championship side, or will they have to carry on?
No, if contracts have been exchanged, and also I think it would be absolute folly for any prospective owner of a club which is, it's not one of the elite clubs in the Premier League. We all have to be honest about this. I'd say exactly the same about my club. That is a business risk, and if you make an investment, you look at the investment from a long-term strategic position, and short-term issues such as relegation in 1 year, it goes with the territory. And if you're not familiar with that, you shouldn't be getting involved. You shouldn't be going near football. Although, of course, the history of football tells us that there's quite a few people who we'd wished had never got involved with football in the first place.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your insight, Kieran. It's been really, really interesting. And hopefully, fingers crossed, everything will go swimmingly. Maxim Denim will always, if he does sell the club, if this all goes through, he'll always be remembered so fondly for everything he's done, getting us from the depths of football into the elite, where it's the riches. And I just hope he is going to be selling us to the right person and not the wrong one.
Yep, and all the best for things going forwards.
Thank you so much, Kieran.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for joining me on this special show. Please do remember to hit the like, the subscribe, and the bell button below to be alerted to any new videos we do here at Up the Cherries in all departments. Please also do remember to watch our previous interviews. We've recently interviewed Carlton Palmer. We also interviewed, of course, Harry Redknapp, Efan Akuku, Sean Teal, and there's lots more. So please do check out the other videos on this channel. Please do also check out, if you've enjoyed this show, we did do a previous meeting with Kieran Maguire, which was really, really interesting, about the price of football, which of course is his book as well. And all the links will be in on that video. So until the next video, up the cherries, and I'll speak to you in the next one.